midnight, the phones at the Burkina Faso presidential palace began to ring. The French president was requesting an urgent meeting. Ibrahim Traoré calmly replied, "No, I reject the request for a meeting," and hung up the phone. His assistant warned in astonishment, "Mr. President, France will impose economic sanctions on us." Traoré smiled, "They can no longer harm us. The first phase of our plan is complete." He opened the map on his desk. A new economic corridor covering the entirety of Africa was marked on it. When they wake up this morning, the French will see that their 70-year colonial order has collapsed. When Zongo returned to the hospital with this information, Traoré's condition had worsened. Foreign Affairs advisor Mamadou Diallo looked anxiously at the president. "Mr. President, you know that France will put tremendous pressure on us. They won't accept our decision to nationalize our mines." Leclerc rose helplessly and left the room. Traoré rose from his chair and moved toward the window. The city of Ouagadougou slept peacefully under the night lights. "Mamadou, how many years have they been extracting and taking away the gold from our lands? How many years has our people been living in misery while they live in luxury? Enough is enough. But there's no turning back now." Mamadou nodded. "You're right, but I fear the reaction from the other side." Zongo nodded. "Don't be afraid," said Traoré, "these phone calls, these threats. They were all expected. The real surprise will emerge tomorrow." "Then," said Traoré, "I need to address the nation." While the night passed calmly in Burkina Faso, the situation in Paris was completely different. An emergency meeting had been convened at the Ministry of Economy. French Economy Minister Philippe Moreau slammed his fist on the table. How dare he defy us? The gold mines in Burkina Faso are critical to France's security. Traoré cannot do this. Today, I am addressing you not only as a president, but as a brother, a son, a Burkinabe. Marcel Laurent, CEO of the French mining company Goldtech, was worried. "Minister, they've seized not only our gold but also our uranium mines. This means an annual loss of 3.4 billion euros. The news that Traoré had been poisoned but was still standing was like a ray of hope. The French foreign minister interjected with a serious expression, "The problem isn't just economic. If our other former colonies in Africa take similar steps, we could lose all our influence on the continent. Because you can kill a leader, but you can never kill a people's desire for freedom." Moreau opened the file on the table. "When the markets open this morning, our company's stocks will crash. We need to find a solution urgently." Did he reject our request for a meeting? "We demand the withdrawal of all French military bases from our country." "Yes, Minister." He refused and seemed quite determined. The shock of even the cameraman in the studio could be felt. Moreau took a deep breath. "Then it's time to activate Plan B. Convene the National Security Council. And prepare our Special Operations Unit. But I ask you, isn't it worth paying this price for true independence?" The next morning, as the sun rose in Ouagadougou, Ibrahim Traoré was already awake, holding a series of meetings in his study. Beside him were Economy Minister Ahmed Sankara and the country's leading mining experts. "Minister, we've implemented the nationalization decision without problems. Our security forces have taken control of all mining sites," said Konate, Undersecretary of the Mining Ministry. Traoré nodded with satisfaction. "How are the preparations for the second phase going? And we stand courageously against any threat to our sovereignty." Ahmed Sankara spread a series of documents on the table. "Everything is proceeding as planned, Mr. President. The secret agreements we've made with Mali, Niger, Ghana, Senegal, and Ivory Coast are ready. They're just waiting for your final signature. Because we are Burkinabe." Meanwhile, tension was escalating in Paris. As soon as the stock market opened, French mining companies' shares went into free fall. Goldtech's shares lost 40% of their value in the first hour. Panic was beginning to spread to other sectors. The French president gathered his cabinet for an emergency meeting at the Élysée Palace. "We cannot accept this situation. We must deploy all economic and diplomatic pressure tools against Burkina Faso. If necessary, we will consider military options." In the center of Ouagadougou, at October Revolution Square, the crowd began to gather. The foreign minister interrupted, "Mr. President, there's a problem. A report just came in from our intelligence service. Traoré hasn't just nationalized the mines in his own country. He has signed a secret economic pact with other West African countries." At the palace, Traoré had retreated to his room after the speech and was alone with Colonel Zongo. "What kind of pact?" asked the president, alarmed. "An entity called the African Resources Union. 5 more countries, Mali, Niger, Ghana, Senegal, and Ivory Coast, are preparing to nationalize French mines in their territories." Traoré smiled, "They can no longer harm us." The president's face turned pale. This is impossible. How could they form such an alliance? How could our intelligence fail to detect this? Mr. President, you know that France will put tremendous pressure on us. Intelligence Service Chief Jacques Giroux stepped forward. Mr. President, Traoré has moved very carefully. For the past 6 months, he has been holding secret meetings with the leaders of these countries. They've conducted all communication through physical couriers. They've been careful not to leave any electronic traces. How many years has our people been living in misery while they live in luxury? Meanwhile, in Ouagadougou, Traoré and his team were implementing the second phase of the plan. A video conference connection had been established with the leaders of 5 African countries. Distinguished colleagues, said Traoré, today, we're taking a historic step for the return of African resources to the African people. Our countries possess rich resources, yet our people have been condemned to live in poverty. Today, we're ending this. Don't be afraid, said Traoré, these phone calls, these threats. The president of Mali spoke from the screen, we appreciate Burkina Faso's leadership. We will also announce our decision to nationalize all foreign mines in our territories this morning. Then, said Traoré, I need to address the nation. The other leaders made similar declarations. When the meeting ended, Traoré had a determined expression on his face. Now it's time to prepare for the third and most important phase. How dare he defy us? In a highly secure room on the lower level of the presidential palace, financial experts from Burkina Faso and 5 African countries were working. The screens were filled with charts and financial data. Standing in the center of the room was world-renowned economist Dr. Kwame Nkosi. Mr. President, said Dr. Nkosi, the infrastructure for the new currency is ready. The digital currency we've named Afric will be backed by the joint reserves of 6 countries. Now that our mineral resources are under our control, our currency will be extremely strong. The news that Traoré had been poisoned but was still standing was like a ray of hope. Traoré examined the team's work. Launch date? Because you can kill a leader, but you can never kill a people's desire for freedom. We can be ready within 48 hours. All technical infrastructure has been set up, our blockchain system has been tested. It will operate completely independently of the Western financial system. Did he reject our request for a meeting? Traoré nodded. Excellent. This will be not just an economic but also a psychological blow. The French will lose their control over the CFA franc as well. Moreau took a deep breath. As these developments unfolded, panic in Paris was growing. The French intelligence service had only now understood the full scope of Traoré's plan. Economy Minister Moreau was speaking at the emergency meeting. The situation is much more serious than we thought. Traoré and his allies haven't just nationalized the mines, they're creating a new currency. This means the end of the CFA franc system. Our security forces have taken control of all mining sites, said Conate, Undersecretary of the Mining Ministry. Claude Renoir, the French central bank governor, was horrified. If this materializes, our financial control over our former colonies will be completely eliminated. For the French economy, this means an annual loss of 40 billion euros. Ahmed Sankara spread a series of documents on the table. The French president angrily stood up. This is unacceptable. We must take all measures to stop Traoré immediately. Military intervention if necessary. Meanwhile, tension was escalating in Paris. The defense minister objected, Mr. President, military intervention would be very risky. Burkina Faso has now signed defense agreements with Russia and China. If we intervene, it could turn into an international crisis. The French president gathered his cabinet for an emergency meeting at the Élysée Palace. Then what can we do? Asked the president desperately. Intelligence Chief Giroux stepped forward. Perhaps we can act from within. We still have some supporters in the Burkina Faso military. A coup. He has signed a secret economic pact with other West African countries. As those in the meeting silently evaluated this idea, in Ouagadougou, Traoré had anticipated such a move. He was having a private conversation with Defense Minister General Koulibaly. General, our intelligence reports indicate that France might support a coup attempt. Are there any pro-French elements within the army? I know, Colonel, said Traoré with a tired smile. The general smiled. Mr. President, we've already purged the army. In the last 3 months, we've reassigned all suspicious officers to different duties. Currently, only patriotic soldiers occupy critical positions. Our army is ready, Mr. President. What about our defense systems? After the ministers left, Zongo immediately summoned 3 officers he trusted. Russian and Chinese defense systems are fully active. Our airspace and borders are secure. Additionally, our mutual defense pact with the 5 allied countries is in effect. My body is still fighting the poison. Traoré nodded with satisfaction. Very good. Now we can proceed to the final phase. Everyone was impressed by the courage of their young leader. The next day, the world awoke to a major shock. 6 African countries, Burkina Faso, Mali, Niger, Ghana, Senegal, and Ivory Coast, simultaneously announced the formation of a new economic union and the creation of a common currency called Afrique. The new currency was backed by the country's rich mineral resources. The international media was in shock. The CNN anchor's voice trembled as she read the news, a historic development in Africa. 6 countries have announced their exit from the CFA franc system, a remnant of France's colonial era, and have created their own currency. Experts indicate that this move will deal an annual blow of 40 billion euros to the French economy. And countries like Russia and China promised economic and military support to Burkina Faso. Traoré appeared before the people again a week after the poisoning incident, though his health had not yet fully recovered. The Paris stock market was experiencing a historic crash. French companies lost billions of euros in value in a single day. While the French government announced emergency measures, signals were coming from other African countries about joining the new alliance. Dr. Emily Thompson from the Economic Analysis Centre in London, in an interview with the BBC, said, "This is the greatest economic revolution of the last 70 years. African countries have taken a major step toward breaking free from the economic dependencies of the post-colonial era." This movement, led by Ibrahim Traoré, could reshape the economic future of the continent. The crowd applauded wildly. In Ouagadougou, Ibrahim Traoré was addressing the people from the balcony of the presidential palace. Tens of thousands gathered in the square, cheering enthusiastically. Today marks a new beginning, not just for Burkina Faso, but for all of Africa. Our resources now belong to us. Our money now belongs to us. Our future now belongs to us. Difficult days await us, Traoré continued. The crowd was shouting, "Traoré! Traoré! Africa unity! Ask Traoré!" Meanwhile, in Paris, the French cabinet was in a crisis meeting. The French president looked desperately at his advisors. How did we experience such a major intelligence failure? How could we not foresee this conspiracy? Mali, Niger, Guinea, and other former French colonies began to take similar steps. Intelligence Chief Giroux bowed his head. "Mr. President," Traoré moved very intelligently. He didn't use traditional communication channels, didn't leave digital traces. He worked with old-school diplomatic methods and executed his plan perfectly. A month after the poisoning incident, Traoré fully recovered. "What are we going to do now?" asked Economy Minister Moreau. "This new currency, this new economic alliance. They threaten all our economic interests in Africa. Most importantly, Burkina Faso's rich gold mines and other natural resources were now under the country's own control." The president took a deep breath. "For the first time, we'll have to take a step back. Traoré's plan is too solid. Military intervention would provoke a reaction from the international community. Economic sanctions are now ineffective because they've already economically detached themselves from us. Sometimes, the brightest lights are born in the darkest moments." The foreign minister stepped forward. "Perhaps we should accept the new reality and try to establish new relations with these countries on a more equal basis?" "Stop!" A heavy silence fell over the room. France's 70-year economic hegemony in Africa was coming to an end. A week later, a historic meeting was held in Geneva. On one side were representatives of the African Resources Union countries led by Ibrahim Traoré, on the other, representatives of France and other European countries. In his opening speech, Traoré said, "We want equality, not hostility. We want cooperation, not exploitation. The old days are behind us. Now is the time to turn a new page." "Mr. President," said Leclerc, with surprise and haste. The French foreign minister reluctantly nodded. "We accept the new reality. We want to rebuild our relations with African countries on the basis of mutual respect. And the scene I've witnessed deeply concerns me." A slight smile appeared on Traoré's face. The final phase of his plan had also been realized. Now African countries could sit at the table as equal partners. After the meeting, in a private room, Traoré and the leaders of the 5 allied countries gathered. The president of Mali turned to Traoré. "You did it, Ibrahim. No one believed it, but you succeeded. You opened the path to Africa's economic independence. We make a significant contribution to the country's economy." Traoré nodded humbly. "This is just the beginning. We still have a long road ahead. But now we will determine our own destiny. How the people live, what they're suffering." That evening, returning to Ouagadougou from Geneva, he was lost in thought on the plane. In his mind was the night he planted the first seeds of his plan, just 6 months ago, in his room at the presidential palace, holding the old colonial agreements in his hand. He had sworn, "One day we will break free from these chains." Of course, there can be challenges in developing regions. Now that day had come. As the plane entered Burkina Faso's airspace, the lands he saw below were now truly free. 2 years later, at the Davos Economic Forum, the world's leading economists were discussing the African Resources Union miracle. The AFRIC currency was supporting one of the world's fastest-growing economic regions. The 6 member countries were growing faster than ever before in their history, making infrastructure investments, and improving their education and health systems. Professor Richard Hamilton from Harvard University, speaking on the panel, said, "The success of the Traoré model has shown that the old colonial economic order is no longer sustainable. When African countries control their own resources and establish their own financial systems, they can achieve true economic independence." The president's face turned pale. And in Ouagadougou, at the presidential palace, Ibrahim Traoré was examining new plans on his desk. 6 more countries had applied to join the African Resources Union. A new era had begun.